The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the Northeast Conference on the Teaching of Foreign Languages, I would like to welcome you to the fourth in our special webinar series on our 2021 conference theme, Finding Our Voice, World Languages for Social Justice. This afternoon's webinar is entitled, Designing for Equity, Power, Perspectives, and Protocols. This webinar has been generously sponsored by Wayside Publishing. Please visit waysidepublishing.com for more information about how Wayside can assist with your remote teaching and learning needs. If you would like to make a donation to help support our work, please visit nectfl.org/donate. My name is John Carlino, NECTFL Executive Director, and I will be hosting this afternoon's webinar along with Northeast Conference board members, Dr. Frank Ruggiero and Jimmy Wildman as moderators. We are grateful to our presenter, Dr. Maryann Woods-Murphy, for offering us her time and expertise. This webinar is being recorded. A link to the recording will be posted to our website at nectfl.org/webinars as soon as it is available. The webinar is scheduled to last 1 hour, with 45 to 50 minutes devoted to the presentation. The remaining time will serve as Q&A with the presenter to answer your questions. Attendees are encouraged to submit questions during the webinar using the question feature of the GoToWebinar control panel on the side of your screen. Our moderators will organize these questions and share them with the presenter as relevant and/or at the end. In the event of technical difficulties, please remain connected as you are able. If the difficulties are on your end, please contact GoToMeeting customer support for assistance. If you're having difficulty with sound, click on Phone Call under Audio in the control panel and call in with the number provided. And now, please let me take this opportunity to introduce you to our presenter, Dr. Maryann Woods-Murphy. Maryann Woods-Murphy is an international talent development, language, and equity specialist. She has a 40-year teaching story, most of it in New Jersey public schools. Maryann is the 2010 New Jersey Teacher of the Year and the 2010 NECTFL Teacher of the Year. She is a director on the board of the National Education Association Foundation and is a past director on the NECTFL board. Dr. Woods-Murphy earned her EDD in teacher leadership in 2016, and in 2019, she launched Woods-Murphy Educational Services, a professional learning consultancy. Maryann, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Welcome to the webinar.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here today to share with you Designing for Equity, Power, Perspectives, and Protocols. NECTFL is an organization that has fostered best practices, innovation, and getting language instruction right for my whole career. So it's an honor really to connect with you all here today and share my perspectives and learning on such an important topic. So in this webinar, we're going to think about the way we build our language classes to create the opportunity for student interaction. I remember years ago, I asked my students for feedback on my class, and I almost fell over when Matt said, "I wish we could have had more of a chance to speak with each other." I thought, really? I do that all the time. I mean, I provide many activities and I provide opportunities like paired activities and all kinds of things. And I sort of pushed back a little, kind of shocked by the feedback, I have to say. And he said, when I reflected, right, I realized I had provided opportunities, but not so many unscripted, interpersonal, and authentic conversations, really. So I learned a lot from Matt, who's a teacher today. So when educators design for equity, they ensure that students are given fair and rich learning opportunities. We're living at a time when we're thinking and hearing so much about equity in all of its manifestations. And when we design our classes, we are trying to find out how to fit our instructions to students' needs. So today, I want you to, if you have nearby a pen and a piece of paper, we're going to do a couple of little pauses, just really 20 seconds or 30 seconds at a time for you to jot down some thinking, because in a format like this where I'm speaking, to so many people, and we don't have the opportunity to really practice some of the things that I'm going to be talking about today. I'd like you to have a kind of interaction with yourself. So we're going to walk through some really key practices in this webinar, 3 actually, and I want you to think through your own practice, just like Matt's question to me allowed me to think through my own actual failings in that particular way, because I changed up what I did immediately or thought about ways to improve. I hope that these things that I share with you might provide you an opportunity to think through your practice. So today we're going to start with a self-compassion checkup to just let some of the stresses and cares of our day slip away. It might feel odd to put ourselves in a place of calm and to focus to start, but I've noticed that allowing participants and students to do this kind of thing before thinking deeply is a good thing. So I'll be talking a lot after the self-compassion check-in because it's our framework, but you can have the opportunity to sort of center yourself and be part of our learning experience here today. After the self-compassion checkup, we're going to talk a little bit about why equity, why power and perspectives. What does this all have to do with class design? 3 protocols that I have found to be absolutely invaluable. How does this all connect with SEL? And then we're going to have some concluding thoughts and reflections. So I'm pretty excited, and I hope you are too. So let's take a moment to bring kind awareness to our day, the impact of our day on our bodies and emotions. We're invited to offer ourselves the same kindness and compassion that we would offer a loved one, taking a break from our busy thinking and judging minds. So with our eyes closed, I want you to draw one or both of your hands to your heart, letting them rest flat on your chest. I want you to take 3 full, deep breaths into the body, letting both chest and belly expand. So I'll do it with you. Take this time to acknowledge that you're doing the best you can, and offer yourself any words of support or compassion that you might offer a loved one. I want you to be there for yourself as a friend, holding yourself unconditionally for a few more breaths. This activity was adapted from a website called mindfulnessexercises.com. There are loads of free resources, script, and practices. I work in a school in New Jersey, and the beginning of our faculty meetings has activities like this because we find that coming through all of the craziness of everyone's days, it's good to take a moment to center oneself. So today we're going to be connecting equity with a lot of other things that I spoke about, but I want to first get a common understanding of what we mean by equity. And I took this definition from the Annie E. Casey Foundation, a great organization. And the idea of equity is the state quality or ideal of being just, impartial, and fair. The concept of equity is synonymous with fairness and justice. It's helpful to think of equity as not simply a desired state of affairs or lofty value. To be achieved and sustained, equity needs to be thought of as a structural and systemic concept. So when we think about equity, a lot of folks think about also equality, and they think it's the same thing, but it's not really the same. Equity involves trying to understand and giving each person what they need, right, to lead full, healthy lives. But equality says everyone gets the same thing, to enjoy full and healthy lives. So similarly, equity and equality promote fairness and justice, but it only works if we all start from the same place and need the same things. And we know as educators or people involved in some part of the education process that really we have rooms of students who have many different abilities and limitations, challenges, and lofty gifts. What can we do to create an atmosphere where everybody gets what they need and we're just one person, right? How do we do that? And I've seen illustrations of this where there are folks standing on different size boxes, but I like this one of the sunflowers trying to get some sun. So on the left, that might be an image of equality, right? Everyone gets the three-legged stool and all the flowers can go higher, but as you notice, poor little sunflower on the right doesn't get to go over the fence because little tiny sunflower needs a bit more height. If you go to the right, you see equity, right? Equity is, hey, this sunflower on the left is good. The flower goes right over the fence. The sun is shining, and that plant does not need any help, right? Because they're high enough to get the sun. And the second one just needs a little boost, but that third little one needs a lot of help, right? So all of us are like that in some kind of way. If you kind of quick assess what you're great at or what your challenges might be, you realize that we're just a mixed bag of needs and of strengths and challenges. So our students are the same, and equity is a really important notion, an important concept to hold very closely to our hearts, because it's how we provide what's needed in our classes. So I want to take a moment and I want you to grab that piece of paper that I asked you to grab, and I want to take 20 seconds. I'm going to ring a little bell. I just want you to think about this question. Okay. Sometimes in our classes, silence, just saying nothing, simply waiting, is very hard to do. It's especially hard to do when I can't see my students, my participants, my people, but it's really an important thing to do, provide a little space. So how do you try to make your classroom a place of equity? And you may have said some things like this, right? You may have said in your class, you increase your cultural competency, right? You are learning all the time. You're going on websites like Teaching Tolerance, and you're taking little mini courses, or you're in a reading group with your colleagues reading books like White Fragility, or you're learning what the cultural competency framework might be, and how you can increase your cultural competency. You're figuring out ways to welcome our LGBTQ+ students in your class. I'm right now tutoring a young student who's trans, and we are learning how to work with Spanish to try to create a place where they say, I am not included in this gendered language, says the 15-year-old, and I would like a little bit of recognition by the language of who I am. And it's really challenging to figure it out, and we've got a lot of ways. We use ella and different kinds of words, but it is a language that's very gendered. And so, but even just having the conversation is welcoming, and figuring out places on the planet where people are thinking about how to create more inclusive language. And there was a webinar with NECTFL that talks about LGBTQ plus language. If you want to look at the webinars that are posted, you might have said you're learning about implicit bias, or how to create a more culturally relevant pedagogy. You might be a person who's advocating for students who need support, or you may focus your energy on building relationships with students, or co-creating a classroom community by creating the norms and rules by which you live in your classroom community. All of these things relate to equity, and each of us has to sort of think through what we can grow on and how we can embrace aspects of equity that are really vital, and little by little we create a more welcoming room. I'm a 2010, as John said, New Jersey State Teacher of the Year, and so we just published last week. I was the drafter of the statement for all of us 14 State Teachers of the Year signed an equity statement. And in that equity statement, we make lots of recommendations for our schools in New Jersey, right? What do we think should be some important steps that could create more equitable classrooms and schools and districts in New Jersey? And we published it, and we're reaching out. And what our point is really, as well, is for teachers to take a document like ours and use it as a kind of a talking point, a kind of a point of departure, shall I say, where you can have conversations. When we were going through the process of creating this statement, seriously, we weren't all on the same page, and not all of us were passionate about the same issues, but we worked through protocols, and we worked through prioritizing, and we came up with something that we could all agree with, or most of us. And that then is being used by folks in other states around the country, and it's our effort to increase equity. But today, we're going to talk about a different aspect of how we create equity in our classroom, and it's about how we share the space, time, and presence in our classrooms in terms of equity, right? How might we do better, right? How might we create a classroom where this is not really the model? So if you look at this picture where you see power, you see a typical classroom, even in an online setting, right? So you might find the teacher is in the middle, and all knowledge and information is coming from that teacher. Even, right, like if I take my mouse here and you say, well, my classroom's really interactive, I'm doing like all these great things, and you probably are, you're probably amazing, and you can be amazing being that, you know, sage on the stage, center of the room. You can be, because I've certainly enjoyed many classes in my career where the teacher has been at the center of power. But this is not the best way to get people to know each other, to think together, to learn together. So in your class, you might have this hub of power where you are, and you might be saying, okay, John, what do you think about this? And then John is responding, and then you say, okay, Maria, like, what do you think? And then they're responding. But never do these rays coming out from the sun god that is the teacher interact, right? So that's power, right? That's power, and the structure of how we do what we do really indicates our lived core values. So we might say we care about all of these important things about equity, but never do our children or students or participants get a chance to bring their whole selves into the conversation. So I think power sharing might look like something like this, right? This is an image of co-authorship network. It's a visualization, and I was looking for something that would show the kinds of chaotic but real interactions, collaborations that happen when people do joint work, right? And it's not at all, where's the center? Hard to find. What's going on? A whole lot. It's emerging, and it's it's what the world looks like, you know, when it's working really well. And I think and I urge that our classrooms look more like this. So how can you include all voices if the students don't have the freedom, right, to have unscripted, meaningful conversations or activities or products? You just won't. You won't, because you are the designer of all things your classroom. You are the creator of all things your district. And if you don't focus on this aspect of the work, then what comes out is not going to be as authentic, as experienced learning as it could be. It just doesn't happen without you sculpting it out of your classroom plans. When we teach, we want to have the opportunity for students to have variety of perspectives in on a problem or an issue, right? Hive minds. You know, sometimes I'll see somebody post something on Facebook and they'll say, hive mind, give me an answer to this, quick, answer this question about education, answer this question about, you know, what kind of carpet I should get for my doorway. It could be what kind of recipe would be best for my green bean casserole, even though that's like a kind of relic of family background. But when we get a lot of people weighing in, it just is much more satisfying because we can figure things out, right? So too in our classes, right? Students know when they're being given fake jobs and or giving real jobs. So if we really don't want to hear from them, you know, we give them very scripted, limited things. And if we don't trust that they can emerge with something, then we won't create those opportunities. So I like to think of it like this. Let's try another visual, and hopefully that will be helpful. Let's say that the blue dots are your students and they're instructed to describe the elephant. From which perspective do your students see the elephant in the room? Maybe you're wondering how you might get a fuller picture of the whole elephant. So let me kind of go back and forth with this. So if I asked my granddaughter, and she said, well, you know, you'd want to get some of them, couldn't they? She said, rotate around the elephant, which I thought was pretty brilliant, and move around so they could get different perspectives. Like, yes. And couldn't they talk with each other about what they see? And I say, well, what if they have to stay put and their view is the only one that they can see? Well, then you might want to have, you know, the people conferring who's looking at the tail of the elephant talking with the people who are looking at the ears of the elephant. And so we get a fuller picture of the whole elephant. And this is kind of how our world networks work. So when we design for equity, you're probably thinking, or you may be thinking, oh gosh, Maryann, please, like, we have so many things to pack in our classes. We have to do communicative and cultural objectives and other standards. We have all those 5 C's: cultures, connections, comparisons, communities, and communication. We have modes of communication that we're thinking about. And oh my gosh, in an online environment or hybrid, are you crazy? Yeah, maybe, but I think we can do a good job with protocols, because when we design for equity, really can invite our students to bring their whole worlds and lives into our classroom. I've talked to teachers sometimes and I said, so tell me about Harriet, you know, tell me about her. Well, you know, we've only been in class a month. I really don't know her very well. Well, why not? You got to know her, right? Well, have you talked to her? Yeah, you know, a little bit, you know. So sometimes other people might tell you a whole lot about Harriet, but it involves creating a space for that kind of communication. What am I talking about? What do I mean designing for equity? So I want you to think again. I'm going to give you just a few seconds. I'll put my fingers up. Grab your piece of paper. Who holds the power in your classroom? I'll give you 20 seconds. Thank you. So when we build for maximum interactions, what we really are in terms of language educators, we're really focusing more than ever on that interpersonal mode when we build the opportunity for interactions, voices, and more. I always come to the point of saying, how do we do this? I would say that the power of a great protocol shows us the wisdom is in the room. So you really need a strategy. You need protocols that help us bring all those voices in. So we're going to do 3 today. We're going to work on 3 protocols that I hope can be included in your worlds, whether that world be a classroom of first graders, university students, whether it be a community organizing setting, whatever your teaching world happens to be, it's important to think about protocols because they help you through. I guess what I think about protocols is they help you to organize chaos. So those images I have, you might say in the beginning, those pictures of the interactions, you might say, okay, great. What does that look like on a lesson plan? I might have, you know, evaluators on this call, administrators who say, Maryann, if I see that, that's not a great lesson. I don't know what's going on. Well, you have to organize your chaos. You have to organize the organic nature of it. So one protocol that I would talk about is circle practice. With circle practice, it's important to start with some kind of a sound. And I have this as a Tibetan singing bowl, and I used it in the beginning in our self-compassion check-in. When you create a sound to mark a space in your classroom or your setting, you create an entry into another way of communicating. So you may want a Tibetan singing bowl or a bell, or you might just have some kind of sound that you could have some kind of music, but something that will indicate you're in a different space. You know, the usefulness of a cup is in its emptiness. So how can we create space for people to open up? I just ran a session, a healing circle the other day, and I had some folks who were reluctant at first, but by the end of it, folks said, thank you. You know, it's good to have an opportunity to share myself in this kind of setting. So when you're having circle practice, it's important, especially if you're working online. If you're sitting in a physical space, you're going to sit in a circle, right? But if you're not in a physical setting, if you're online, you then hold the circle in your mind. You are present. The circle is a powerful, powerful reminder of a way of connecting that doesn't have a hierarchy, where every voice is included. Our ancestors for millennia sat around fires, right? They told stories, they gathered, they shared the heat of the warm fire. They thought about their lives, and they gathered, and it was in a circle. It was in a circle. So when you create a circle practice, it's really got just a few parts. You begin, you start, and you tell people how it is that they are going to talk with each other. So you say, for example, I'm picking up the talking piece, I'm putting down the talking piece. So for example, if I want to talk and I'm sitting in the circle, folks can say what they want to say, like, what is an important, like there might be a question like, what is someone you consider, who is someone you consider heroic? And I would then say, I'm taking the talking piece, and I would say, I really feel connected to, I don't know, Kamala Harris, because, and I would go on and talk about this person, and then say, when I'm done, nobody asks me when I'm done, I say, I'm putting the talking piece down. What's funny is it can be any kind of shape, for example, a talking stone, a talking piece, any kind of thing. The other day, I started out and had people talking about using a talking stone But by the end of it, people got confused, and by the end it was a talking rock, right? I'm taking the talking rock, and at one point I said, oh, I'm going to take the talking boulder, but I thought it was so funny, but no one laughed. And I find I'm funniest when nobody is, I'm not really trying to be funny, but not funny when I'm trying to be funny. But it doesn't really matter what the talking piece is as long as you decide on one, and you could just talk about it and you envision that circle. So you also have to have some circle agreements, right? And of course, in a world language classroom, you have these in the target language. We treat each other with kindness and respect, listen with compassion, honor each other's unique ways and feelings, and this is a no judgment zone. And even early language speakers can say something about life. And they can, when you have circle agreements that everybody has agreed upon and you put them up when it's going to be this opportunity to speak, it's something that can frame the experience. So you ring the bell, you have a check-in, something like this. You can, if you have students in a chat, you could just post the check-in and say, I need, I bring, I look forward to. You're just trying to get the pulse on folks and give them a chance to bring themselves something easy, an easy kind of a question or an easy kind of sentence tag that brings people into the conversation. And that's a very nice way to warm everybody up. After that part, this check-in part, you move to your core questions that have a purpose, for example, of community building. These are examples, but there are so many questions you can also find. Who is a hero of yours from real life or the movies, and why do you choose this person? What does it mean to be popular? If you could spend a day with anyone who has ever lived, who would it be and why? I did this with some folks, and one young woman, it was a high school student. I worked with a teacher to do one of these circles, and they would like to have spoken with their father who had passed away, right? So, it's really important that people feel safe, and what we say is what you learn from circle leaves here, but what you share stays here. So it's got to be a safe space for people to be able to share what they're comfortable sharing, right? So in virtual classrooms, you can go into breakout rooms with 1 or 2 people and have one of these questions and shoot it out to the breakout room, and then you can encourage them to take their time. And at first, people may be uncomfortable and say, oh, the other day, someone said, I heard this was going to be about sharing, and I just was going to click out, but I'm so glad I didn't. And then another person at the end, I said, how'd you experience that? And they said, I feel like I can breathe now. Really, I was very moved by that. So then after those questions, 1 or 2 or 3, depending on how much time you have, you do a checkout question, something simple like, I leave here feeling, how do you leave here feeling? I leave here feeling like I am not alone. I leave here feeling like I can breathe. I leave here feeling like I can break down barriers. Whatever it might be, I leave here feeling less anxious. So that's one of the things that we've been noticing, and I am also certified as a like education trauma informed educator, and we learned that trauma is serious. The impact of trauma on learning crosses socioeconomic barriers. It's real, and it leaves its mark on our bodies. And so whatever we can do to alleviate that trauma, creating systems of support, the better. So how are you leaving here? So I ring my bell. We're imagining that whole thing just happened. The bell has a sound that trails off, and it's nice to hear it to calm everyone down, to make everyone feel centered. So the basics of the circle are opening the circle, teach and remember circle guidelines, doing the work of circle, meaning getting into some of those core questions, and community building activities, and closing it out, right? So there's a beginning, there's a middle, and an end. The beginning is a sound, an easy question, some hard questions that you feel the group can deal with, can warm up to, nothing too much. Even simple questions can really, trigger someone. So you got to really know your group. I said once, "How are you?" And a woman said she was terrible. She was caring for four elderly people, all who had their own issues and difficulties, and she started to cry. But don't be afraid of that, because sometimes a person will start to get emotional. But everyone together can just say, thank you so much for sharing that, and we appreciate you. Some people at times like that, super emotional moments, will ring the bell or ring a chime, or someone else in the group can say, I think we need to ring a chime or ring a bell because it's an important thing that just happened. So takeaways from this protocol are that students can share important parts of their lives, and even very limited vocabulary can be used to discuss important things. Emotional moments happen, like I told you, and there's laughter and there's tears, because it's hard for people to say something, and it's hard for people to share anything, especially now as we've become increasingly isolated, and it's tough for people. So it's really something that we can allow to happen. Now, I want you to look at this picture. This picture is a physical place. It's called the KIVA, and it's both a ceremonial place, but it's also the name of a process that that I want to talk about. So we have circle, and we've talked about circle, and that's something that we can keep and we can learn more about. And at the end of this, I have resources that you can get detailed instructions on these practices if you want to try this tomorrow. So a KIVA is a place in practice, and it's a second protocol. I learned this process when I was working in 2011, 2012 in the Department of Education, the U.S. Department of Education, as a Washington Teaching Ambassador Fellow. And I got the chance to go out with the Hispanic Commission, the White House Commission on Hispanic Excellence in Education. And I went out with a guy, Juan. I didn't go out with him, but I left the building with a team led by Juan Sepulveda and another man named Jose Rico, and they had this process that they had learned, and they used it for both small and super gigantic groups, like 500 people. What is it? It's amazing. So here's the process.
Maryann,
Yes.
before we continue, there are a couple of questions that came in about the circle practice. Can we answer those first?
Of course.
So one of the questions was, when you are doing the circle protocol, are you doing that in the target language or in English?
Target language. So what I would recommend doing is teaching the kids going really simply, right? Like things that they can handle in the target language. So you can preload the conversation with feeling words if you're going to be talking about feelings or about family, but you can ask very simple questions like, what is your mother like? What is your sister like? What do you enjoy doing at home? They can be, or what is a memory that you have, if they can handle past tense. So you're doing it in the target language. All of these things are practices that you would do in the target language. You might want to, for example, give an explanation sheet in English about what's going on. That could be helpful. And so that people understand what they're going to be engaging in, so that they understand the prospect. I suspect that teachers and students will ask for it over and over again, especially once they get used to it. Were there any more questions about that?
There is. Yep. So another one was, how often would you do this practice?
I mean, it really depends. You might want to do it once a week. It's something that you can I don't know, on Fridays or Mondays. It doesn't have to be a very long period of time. You can have students request circle, like quiero círculo, and you'd have to build it into your own lesson planning, your own work. What I would say is that this particular practice works very well if it's done regularly, right? But it doesn't have to be a whole class period, but it certainly could be a kind of culminating activity, sort of front loading some vocabulary, some structures, and then practicing them with this type of structure might be really an enjoyable and effective practice.
Another one was that this circle practice sort of resembles the idea behind restorative practices, including using a talking piece. Is that along the right lines?
Yeah, it's totally a restorative practice. And it's a practice that people use in restorative schools where they've taken on restorative practices. It can be used for, but the suggestion I have is taking this and using it for community building in a world language classroom. Right? So when people get used to holding circle, it can be used for myriad other things. And I suspect that in schools that would use circle and get certain, there might be students who want to become facilitators, learn how to facilitate circle, or upper level students can certainly do it, without the teacher after a while. They can sort of help plan it. So it's absolutely in the restorative justice approach to education as well.
And one last question, and then we can move on. You had mentioned the check-in questions. I look for, and what was the third one?
I look for, and I don't know. I have to go back. You see, I can, you'll have the PowerPoint. I don't remember it's not, let's see. I bring, thank you.
Thank you.
I bring, thank you. There are so many different kinds of questions that you can ask, right? So that's just one example I'm looking for, and I bring. So what I like about that is that it allows people to say, what do you bring to this? What's your contribution? What are you offering the group? I bring optimism, right? Yo traigo optimismo. No? Yo necesito calma. Yo quiero amigos, right? So it can be very, very simple, and that question is quick. That could be just right in a chat with students. They can find those words. Is that have I answered those questions? Anything else? So. Yeah?
I think we're good for the moment.
Okay, that's great, because then we can get some clarity around different practices. Good. So the second protocol is this KIVA process, and this is very easy, very easy. And this idea is that any group, if you randomly choose 6 people who are willing to be talkers, the number 6 comes from Native American tradition, and it's the 4 cardinal directions, the sky above and the earth below, right? So the idea is that any 6 people kind of represent the room's wisdom. So these are the steps. You choose any 6 people, and they're up in front, like, so in a webinar type of setting, or a Zoom or Google Meet, the 6 students would just be chosen. In a physical space, they would just have chairs in the front of the room. And you ask one question, and each person answers the question for 1 minute, right? Then it goes back to the first talker, and they lift up one thing that struck them, that any of the other 6 said. They can agree, expand, or wonder. In the meantime, the other people in the room are jotting down questions and reflections. Now, I've seen this work. I had to run a session for blue ribbon schools, teachers, administrators, and everything, and we used this, and it was very effective. I've used this with my classes. I've used it with 4th graders and 10th graders. And so you might, like a question that might come up is like, what are we doing well in our class, right? Or what you know, and people might say, or what do you like? I like this, I like this, I like this, but they have to talk for 1 minute. If you have students who are very beginners, maybe you make it 30 seconds or 60 seconds. You can modify it. The point is not how much time. The point is that you're passing the question from person to person. It goes through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then it goes back. No new question. They just comment on something that they heard from the other people. So this means they have to listen to what has been said. And this is very, very useful for language learners. The experience of having to speak for 1 minute about a matter of substance is powerful. And the other students who write about the same questions can prep learners to meet and deepen the conversation in breakout rooms. So you can have big pieces of chart paper in a physical space, but you can also have breakout rooms where people go and think about it. You could have the 6 presenters, and then the questions come back around about the first comments, and then you can deepen the conversation with those comments that come up. With the fruit, you kind of harvest the ideas that come up. So this is very easy, right? So let's think through it again. So you've got 6 people, you get volunteers, and you're asking 1 question. Everybody answers that same question. Now you go back to the first person who spoke, and their job is to comment on anything that they heard or they liked or they were interested in from anybody else's comments. So, you know, it's very interesting to hear people have the power and take the mic. And then you can have people in their small groups listening and commenting and sharing. I've seen this used, as I said, with large and small groups. Once I saw it with presidents of Hispanics serving in colleges, right? And it was an entire day. And folks said things like, what are some of your biggest challenges? That was one question. The next was, what are some of your biggest accomplishments? Was another question. And then the third was, what are you hoping for? And then people wrote and wrote and wrote and thought all day. They went back into their small groups, they talked about it, and it was really good. For language learners, it can be, I don't know, say, for example, what is the best kind of activity to do during this pandemic, right? And the people can talk about their different activities, their different experiences. And then the people who are responding to what others said could say, yeah, I also like cooking. I make bread. I enjoy fruit salad. I cut oranges. I cut apples. I eat the apples, right? So the conversation can be very, very simple, but it comes from the learner's own life experience. If we don't make the connection between what the learners are living and the learners are saying, then we've lost something vital. And also giving them the opportunity to listen to each other. Folks, are there any questions around that process, the KIVA process? Has anything come up?
We do have a question. It was, how do you leverage the final step of having the entire group write questions or reflections? Are those questions shared for an extension or a reteach, or do they do it live in a journal, or how would that work?
I mean, all of those things are good ideas, right? They can do it in a journal, but they can also do it town hall style, right? They can also, then the power goes from the KIVA council, which this can be called, to the folks who might have something that they want to say. Like, you can say to the class, do you have any reflections on what the folks said, or would you like to add for your own experience? Or you could have every, for example, student group go off into a breakout room or a table, and then talk more deeply about that and come back and then share, right? So it can be, instead of sort of like the process where the teacher's teaching a mini lesson and everybody's going out into their different activities, the mini lesson would be substituted by the students answering this one question. And then the students, it would extend out to the room, the students would work together, and they could come back and share group by group by group. And that's a whole class if you want it to be, right? Or it can be very short. It could be one question that's going to take you 15 minutes to do one question, 6 and 6, and maybe a couple of words by somebody to close it out. So it can be extended almost infinitely, and it can be shrunk. So that's a great process that I've seen as my second protocol. I'm going to go to the third protocol if there are no more questions.
I've got two more. One is, what is your thought on having the students create the question instead of the teacher?
I love it. It's better. You could model it with your question to show them the ropes, right? And this is how we do KIVA. You could print out a one-page sheet, and at the end of this, I have a link to the detailed process of how to do this that I took from a place called Commonweal, and it has all the details. But then once they get the idea, who better than to make up the question than students? That is great. In fact, you could have them make up questions as a homework assignment once they've seen how it goes, and you could pluck the questions out of a hat, or a box, and then all of a sudden you've got student created work. That is so beautiful. That is a beautiful, and thank you so much for bringing that up.
And one final question for this is, the role of the teacher is really just as a moderator in the KIVA process. Is that correct?
Absolutely correct. The teacher is really, the teacher is creating the structure within which the interactions can occur. So the power of protocols is something that allows having a protocol. And I used to be very different. I used to just want everything to be like free flowing. And I thought that was great. But if you have a protocol in place, whether you like KIVA, whether you like a circle, whether you like what we're going to talk about next, then you can pick anything. But having a structure that the students start to understand, they start to get really good at it, and then it creates a lot of opportunity for communication, right? And so that's a beautiful thing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so I'm going to now talk about one of my favorite protocols, and this guy right here, Dan Rothstein, taught it to me, and he is awesome. He is the head of something called the Right Question Institute. And he and Luz Santana were trying to figure out how to get parents to participate more in their students' education. And they were asking them to come, and nobody was coming. And finally, they came up with a list of questions they gave everyone. But then they realized, that's terrible. We're making the questions, and we have to figure out a way for people to make up their own questions, because people really need to ask their own questions. So the QFT stands for Question Formulation Technique. And I'm going to go kind of quickly through this, but I want to tell you that the Right Question Institute has a slew of free resources and scripted opportunities to use the QFT. I'm going to just explain quickly how it works. So the QFT, it starts with something called a question focus, but it's not a question. It's not a question. You start with a question focus, and it's some kind of a statement, and I'll show you an example. Then you put everybody into their groups, and you say, okay, now produce questions and write numbers on those questions. Go, 10 minutes. Then they finish, and then you say, okay, now write down which questions are open-ended and which questions are close-ended. Okay, they do that job, and then you say, okay, now change one of your close-ended questions into an open-ended question, or change your close-ended to an open-ended. So they're playing around with questions. Now pick your favorite 3 questions. You can do this stuff with sticky notes, or you can do it with emojis, or any kind of way. So this is a lot of writing on this screen, but don't worry. I just wanted to show you an example. I did this with myself, but I used this Q focus, which is not a question, with lots of groups of people. And it was, my Q focus is kind of like a prompt, right? So many students do not participate in school activities. This could be my Q focus, right? I don't tell them anything. I explain nothing. The idea is you don't judge, you don't explain, you don't do anything. So then you say, right, So these are some questions that people might come up with, like, which students feel invited to participate, or does the choice of advisor have anything to do with participation, right? So people come up with a slew of questions. Then you say, okay, which questions are open-ended? Which questions are close-ended? Then they do that job. Now you've got all kinds of people talking with each other and sort of arguing about what questions are open-ended, what questions are close-ended, and putting an O and a C. Now they have to switch around, close to open, open to close. And now the super fun part comes. Now you have to choose your top 3 questions, right? So what's really cool is then that people argue about that, and they're all doing this in the target language because that's how you go. And then everybody in their different groups shares their top 3 questions, and then you vote on the top 3 questions for the group. And you come up with something that's really amazing as people discover what they think. So this page, this one page, gives you everything you need to know about QFT. And again, I invite you to go to writequestion.org, and it shows you exactly how to do this. I learned it from their website, and I started doing it with my students, and I've done it literally in many places on the planet, and I found it works every time. So when you're thinking about social and emotional learning, you're really thinking about, and I just bring you to this CEL framework. It's CASEL. It's an organization that works on social and emotional learning. But if you look at the core of it, it's about relationship building, right? We only can begin equity and CEL work by designing world language classes that welcome every student's story and invite every young person's whole self, or every participant, or every colleague. When we listen, we can connect, and we can transform. So form and function are irrevocably coupled, right? They're super important. You can't say, I'm all about equity and just be blah, 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 blah all the time, and the kids are dying. No, you've got to design your classroom experiences so that human connections are possible, right? Form and function are irrevocably coupled. So I love the mycelial network. There's this fungal network under the planet that connects 90% of trees. I learned about it from 3 6th grade boys who told me about it, and I couldn't even believe that trees send each other warning. They connect with each other in this fungal thread. There was an article last week in the New York Times. I couldn't believe it. When these boys told me about the mycelial network, they wanted to make it. They were walking around in Nutley Public Schools when I was there with this box of dirt. And they said, no, the trees are connected. And I'm like, what are you talking about? The trees are connected. Is this like the Matrix? Is this something spooky? They're like, no, it's not scary. It's that the trees send each other nourishment. The trees send each other warnings. They send poison to get rid of predators. I had never heard of this before. But the more I think about it, right, I think about how we as educators can really create an organic, socially complex, sometimes chaotic set of interactions like the mycelial network, like the networks that are so effective in all kinds of disciplines, so that we can create a place where every voice is connected and heard. And I think that's the crucial part for us to take away. And I hope that you've thought a little bit about it. And don't feel like you have to be on your own, because protocols are your friend. I have protocols, so many protocols. They help me develop these interactions so that it is organized, so that I can explain it to an onlooker, so that the students' analytical minds can grasp it. These are so important. And here you have all kinds of more detailed, I know we've run through these protocols very quickly, but it was important to me that you'd have a smorgasbord of opportunities so that you could think about these practices. Someone mentioned restorative practices. You can see that I've taken right from there, healing circles, restorative practices. I learned how to do this from someone named Juanita Robertson, 2 weekends of training. I've gone to the Right Question Institute to learn from Dan Rothstein and Luz Santana. They have wonderful sessions. And so I leave that with you. And I hope that this is something that you can think more about. You can practice with your students, and if there are any questions or time, I don't know if we have any time at all to answer a half a question or whether that's our time.
No, we've actually run out of time, Maryann.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, everyone. It was such a pleasure to meet you here today. I hope this is useful for you.
Are you okay with people emailing you if they have specific questions afterwards?
Absolutely. I really am. I'm totally excited about that. So if you have specific questions or you want to contact me, that's my email. And I look forward to hearing from you. And let me know, did you try something and did it work? How'd that go for you?
Okay, great. And is it okay if we put a PDF of your PowerPoint linked with?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I want people to have access to these resources.
Great. Well, thank you for that very informative presentation. And thank you, Frank and Jimmy, for moderating. As I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, it has been recorded, and the recording will be made available on our website by tomorrow at the latest. If you would like to make a contribution to help support our webinar, please visit nectfl.org/donate. New York State teachers who need proof of attendance for CTLE credit, please use the links provided on our website on the webinars page. Teachers in other states may use the same links, but please consult your local district and/or state regulations regarding documenting PD hours. On behalf of the NECTFL Board of Directors, thank you for attending this afternoon's webinar and enjoy the rest of your evening.